Hello, welcome back to Chapter Day. Happy Friday. We have made it to the end of another week. Praise be to God. And yesterday we read more about Solomon's dedication of the temple and the different people that took part, how he moved his wife from the city of David because Solomon knows, hey, she's an Egyptian. She does not believe in God. He didn't think she was holy enough to be in a place like that. That's very interesting. And they talked about all the gold that he and Huram, the king of Syria, had come together to move to bring to the city of David. So let's go ahead and read chapter 9, more recounts of Solomon's wealth. And when the queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon, she came to prove Solomon with hard questions at Jerusalem, with a very great company, and camels that bear spices, and gold in abundance, and precious stones. And when she was come to Solomon, she communed with him of all that was in her heart. And Solomon told her all her questions, and there was nothing hid from Solomon which he told her not. And when the queen of Sheba had seen the wisdom of Solomon, and the house that he had built, and the meat of his table, and the sitting of his servants, and the attendance of his ministers, and their apparel, his cupbearers also, and their apparel, and his ascent by which he went up into the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. And she said to the king, It was a true report which I heard in mine own land of thine acts and of thy wisdom. Now I'm going to say this. We are testimony to what we believe. We are testimony to what we practice. We are testimony to ah, what we even think. You know, they said, as a man thinketh, so is he. And that's the truth. Sometimes we have to really be careful of what we think, because after our thoughts come what? Our actions. She came to see what she heard, and she saw, and she said, You know what? It's all true. Everything I heard about this man, his wealth, his wisdom, it's true. Look at how his servants are dressing. I always say this. If you drive a car and your car does not look a certain way, and I'm not talking about if the make of your car, you can have the simplest make and model car, but you keep it. When someone comes up to your home, you could have the smallest, maybe the oldest home, but it doesn't have to look dilapidated. Your home, your belongings, your character, the way you bear yourself, your clothing, it tells people who you are. That's all people can see. They cannot read our minds. Only God can do that, not even Satan. He can put things into our minds and we can throw them back out at him. But when people see you, who are you representing? What do they see? Is that what you want them to see? We got to think about that. Okay, verse 6. Howbeit, I believed not their words until I came, and mine eyes had seen it. And behold, the one half of the greatness of thy wisdom was not told me, for thou exceedest the fame which I heard. Happy are thy men, and happy are these thy servants, which stand continually before thee, and hear thy wisdom. Blessed be the Lord thy God, which delighted in thee to set thee on his throne, to be king for the Lord thy God, because thy God loved Israel, to establish them forever. Therefore made he thee king over them, to do judgment and justice. And she gave the king 120 talents of gold, and of spices great abundance, and precious stones. Neither was there any such spice as the queen of Sheba gave King Solomon. And the servants also of Huram and the servants of Solomon, which bought gold from Ophir, bought algum trees and precious stones. She had to confess, I believe everything I heard now that I've seen it. But you know what? They didn't even say half of what really and truly existed. So what she saw and heard exceeded her expectations. Isn't that amazing? That means people were talking about Solomon. Solomon's fame, Solomon's wisdom came from God. It was not something that he himself built up. A lot of us think that, we think because maybe we aren't God fearing, that the things we have don't belong to God, that we didn't get it. Well, I mean, some of us maybe had ill gotten gains. You would know that. But other than that, it says every good and perfect gift comes from God. Every. So she brought him abundance of the wealth that she had. That's another thing. I always repeat this verse, the wealth of the wicked. Not saying that everybody who has wealth is wicked. The wealth of the wicked is stored up for the just. Okay? But this is an example. When people see that you are working, I don't know, there's a strange thing. Even though those people are not themselves affiliated with the God, they respect you somehow because of your beliefs. And God allows them to bless you tangibly. Okay, verse 11. And the king made of the algum trees terraces to the house of the Lord and to the king's palace, and harps and psalteries for singers, and there were none such seen before in the land of Judah. And King Solomon gave to the queen of Sheba all her desire, whatsoever she asked, beside that which she had brought unto the king. So she turned and went away to her own land, she and her servants. So she didn't only give him, he in turn gave her. When we are blessed, we are supposed to bless others. Whether it's a little or whether it's a lot, if God blesses you, don't be stingy. Don't hang on to it. And sometimes I know I've been like that. I'm always wanting to be sure I have enough stored up. No. If you know God is blessing you, what do you think is going to happen? If it runs low like the widow with the oil, God's going to replenish it. Help those. If someone asks you for help and you can, it doesn't matter. Just let them know it's going to be a little, but a little or a lot, you give it to them as much as you can. Okay. Verse 12. Verse 13. Now the weight of gold that came to Solomon in 1 year was 636 talents of gold, beside that which chapmen and merchants brought. And all the kings of Arabia and governors of the country brought gold and silver to Solomon. And King Solomon made 200 targets of beaten gold. 600 shekels of beaten gold went to one target. Now, I'm not sure what a target is. I'm thinking it's something they use for fighting. But whatever it was, they used a lot of gold to make just one. And 300 shields made he of beaten gold. We know what a shield is. 300 shekels of gold went to one shield. And the king put them in the house of the forest of Lebanon. Moreover, the king made a great throne of ivory and overlaid it with pure gold. Now we know where ivory comes from. The tusks of elephants, I believe, and I'm not sure, some rhinos, they use those also. But he had ivory overlaid with gold. Ivory by itself is a precious gem. It's a precious material. And then you overlaid that with gold. I'm telling you, when they raided Solomon's temple and Solomon's palace, mm, 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 mm. Okay, verse 18. And there were 6 steps to the throne with a footstool of gold, which were fastened to the throne, and stays on each side of the sitting place, and 2 lions standing by the stays. Now, I see a lot of people try to emulate this pattern of Solomon and his lions. And they had, I think they said Haile Selassie had real lions in his palace. Don't know how that worked out. Verse 19. And 12 lions stood there on the one side and on the other upon the 6 steps. There was not the like made in any kingdom. And all the drinking vessels of King Solomon were of gold, and all the vessels of the house of the forest of Lebanon were of pure gold. None were of silver. It was not anything accounted of in the days of Solomon. Could you imagine that? We pride ourselves if we own something silver. And I remember the time when silver was a big thing. People were making all their little homemade precious wares to drink and stuff from out of silver and shining up the silver. Solomon didn't even count that as worthy to be put into his palace or into the temple. It was not accounted. Verse 21. For the king's ships went to Tarshish with the servants of Huram. Every 3 years once came the ships of Tarshish bringing gold and silver, ivory, and apes and peacocks. And King Solomon passed all the kings of the earth in riches and wisdom. Like I said, there was not one before, and there will never be one after him. And all the kings of the earth sought the presence of Solomon to hear his wisdom that God had put in his heart. And they brought every man his present, vessels of silver and vessels of gold, and raiment, harness and spices, horses and mules, a rate year by year. And Solomon had 4,000 stalls for horses and chariots, and 12,000 horsemen, whom he bestowed in the chariot cities and with the king at Jerusalem. Go figure. And he reigned over all the kings from the river even unto the land of the Philistines and to the border of Egypt. And the king made silver in Jerusalem as stones, and cedar trees made he as the sycamore trees that are in the low plains in abundance. And they brought unto Solomon horses out of Egypt and out of all lands. Now the rest of the acts of Solomon, first and last, are they not written in the book of Nathan the prophet, and in the prophecy of Ahijah the Shilonite, and in the visions of Iddo the seer against Jeroboam the son of Nebat? And Solomon reigned in Jerusalem over all Israel 40 years. And Solomon slept with his fathers, and he was buried in the city of David his father. And Rehoboam his son reigned in his stead. Now I'd say this. Rehoboam was the only son of Solomon that we heard of. When we were doing the genealogies earlier in 2chronicles, they did list some of Solomon's sons, none of which we heard of, except for Rehoboam. And we only heard of him because he became the next king. But that's how it was. I guess they were not men of renown. And you know what God said about Solomon, despite all of these riches and amazing things that he had and made? That we ought not to care and fear about ourselves as to how we are to take care of ourselves. Not saying not to take care of yourself, but when we sit and worry, oh my gosh, where am I going to get clothing? God clothes us. I must have had some of my clothing for years and now holes in them. I think I looked at a top the other day and it started to get a hole after how must be over a decade I've had it. And it's just from where? Okay? God had the children of Israel go through the wilderness and nothing happened to their clothing. 40 years. Their shoes didn't get holes or straps burst or nothing happened, no rips in their garments. God can take care of us. And he does. It doesn't have to be with the wealth of Solomon. Because God said, you know what, even as fancy as Solomon dressed, and I could bet you he wore some serious threads. God said, you know what? He can't even touch the lily of the valley. Those lilies, they spin or they toil not. They don't have to do anything. God takes care of it. He sends the sunshine. He sends the rain. Nobody's responsible for those lilies growing. Excuse me. And they grow beautifully. Beautifully. And God said, you know what? Not even Solomon in all his glory was arrayed like one of those lilies. Not even Solomon. So I would say this. Let us rest and trust. And that's for me, first and foremost, rest. Rest my thoughts, rest my anxieties, rest my cares, and trust. That same God that has that sun shining out there is the God who knows me, the God that knows you and will and can take care of us. We have to trust and wait. That's the part we hate, the wait. But I tell you, I would have loved to see Solomon back in his time. I would have loved to see the palace, and I would have loved to see the temple. But I can tell you, that city, four square, the New Jerusalem that we're going to be entering. Oh, and don't even talk about heaven. We can't even imagine. We can barely sometimes, I don't even think people think heaven is going to be too great because we can't even fathom a world without care and fear and hurt. And I mean, honestly, I was thinking of this the other day. How can we even think of getting up one morning and we don't have to worry about how am I going to get food? How am I, especially if you have a family? How are these children going to be clothed? Do I have enough money to pay for them to go on a field trip? How am I going to make my car payment? How am I going to do the mortgage? What am I going to eat today? We can't even fathom a life without having any of those cares because the fruits on the trees are going to be supplied for us. That's going to be our food. God is going to supply our every need. We will be clothed in the raiment that God chooses. How can we even fathom such a thing? Sometimes I lay in my bed if I have to go out the next day or when I was working and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to wear this tomorrow if I don't have a uniform. I don't have a uniform. So I have to decide what am I going to wear tomorrow? So I lay in my bed thinking about that. I won't have to do that. God is going to, and you know what? God is doing it even now, but we have to do a little work to get it. Okay, but he guides us to where it is. Whether it's the jobs or the stores that have the good prices and the discounts or clearance, whatever it might be, God takes care of us and God will continue to do so if we continue to trust in him. So, with all of that said, I did a lot of talking. I did more talking than I planned. But anyway, that's the end of Second Chronicles chapter 9. Okay, we are going to be moving. Oh, there's quite a number of chapters in Second Chronicles, so we're going to be into this book for a while. We have 30 plus, almost 40 chapters. All right, so until our next reading, remember, keep on listening. We are almost on the brink of the weekend for those of us who work in the workplace. So be encouraged. Not to mention, the Sabbath is coming upon us at the set of the sun, all the way until the set of the sun tomorrow evening. So enjoy it. It's yours. God gave it to us. Okay? And until our next reading, keep listening. Remember, that's how faith comes. So take care. Bye.